Are you a first responder, a veteran, a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, or a Let's Go Blues radio listener? Of course you are. If you're in the market to buy or sell a home, call real estate superstar Mike Burgoyne today at 314-753-4060 or email him at mike@strikewithmike.com to earn special rates today.
A proven winner on the hockey rink, Joe Wolf knows what it takes to be the best. That's why he has the best rates in the area and only has rave reviews of his work with Wolf Power Washing. Get that siding back to its original color with Joe. Call him at 314-420-5434. That's 314-420-5434. Hello and welcome to the special early edition of Let's Go Blues Radio, the original and longest-running blues hockey podcast. This is episode number 37 of season 13 and episode number 468 all time. Support for Let's Go Blues Radio is brought to you in part by Mike Burgoyne of Real Brokerage Realty. Contact Mike at strikewithmike.com or call him today at 314-753-4060 and get started selling your current home or buying a new home today. And by Wolf Power Washing. If you're in the St. Louis area and need the services of a professional power washer, Joe Wolf is your guy. Call him at 314-420-5434 and get the best prices in the area. On today's show, I'm joined by friend of the show, Mike Morreale, senior draft writer at NHL.com and the co-host of the NHL Draft Class podcast. Mike and I today talk about the hype around Macklin Celebrini, and if it's a real hype, it is. And who the Blues could be drafting at number 16. We take a close look at many, many prospects who will likely fall right in that area. And Mike has a lot of great insight on these prospects, how they will fit in with certain teams, and just a defensive-heavy draft class this year, too. So talked about a lot of different defensemen that will be going, a lot of guys who will probably be contributing later instead of next season because, as we all know, defensemen take a little bit longer to figure it out. But there are a couple guys that I think will be making the jump next year, and we do talk about a couple of those guys, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Getting into some Blues news. Again, this is a little bit earlier show. We're releasing this one on Sunday. I wanted to get this out a little sooner with some of Mike's insight. I thought was a little timely, just in case there's any kind of movement with the draft order with trades or anything. So I wanted to go ahead and get this episode out now, and that way we are able to, have everything coming out correctly and not seeming dated. But so a couple of things I wanted to touch on. I forgot to mention on the last show because I think it was released the day that I recorded. Big news that's, to me at least, that's kind of fallen through the cracks, and I don't even know if the Blues have officially released a report on this. Brian Elliott is returning to the St. Louis Blues. No, not as a goalie. He is returning as a goaltending scout and development coach. Remember, he played for the Blues from 2011 to 2016. He has a franchise record of 25 shutouts. And depending on who you talk to, a couple people from this show would say he is possibly the greatest Blues goalie of all time. Despite the fact that the man was basically a backup almost his entire time here, then a split starter. But, man, he had some excellent years, excellent time here in St. Louis, and a big fan of mine, honestly. I'm a big fan of his. He's not a big fan of me. Maybe he is. I don't know. But, I was happy to see this. I actually liked a lot of what Armstrong said he would be doing. In a Hockey News article from our friend Lou Korak, there were some quotes here. So I don't know if this was directly speaking to Lou about it. But Doug Armstrong says, quote, "He's going to work with our development staff, and he's also going to work with our amateur staff on scouting some future players. That was a two-man staff, and we think we were just burning the wick at both ends on those guys too much. He'll be at development camp. That will be his rolling out party. Our vision is our NHL coach will work with our NHL goaltenders, and goalie coach David Alexander will oversee that department. Our American League coach will then work with any NHL goalie under contract. So in the East Coast League or the American League, and Els will work with any drafted goalies that we don't have in development, and then also help our amateur scouts via video and going out and watching some goalies to assess future drafts. So it's a combination job. This sounds like the Blues have really realized there's maybe some gaps in their scouting and maybe even in their development coaching. So they're trying to address that. And for those that remember or heard any things about the Blues when Elliott was here, he was a team guy. He worked hard. He was always working out, before games, never took a day off, skated in a lot of the optional skates, even if he was the starter the next night or whatever. So a guy that really does live on the ice hockey rink. Armstrong also said in that article, it was interesting, that he was basically living in Wisconsin, raising his family, and boredom set in, and he wanted to get back on the rink. And, can't blame him. The dude didn't play last season in the NHL. Also interesting, he is not officially retired from the NHL, so I guess maybe if there's an injury or something comes up somewhere, maybe he's still making himself available to play. But exciting to have him back here with the St. Louis Blues. Again, I'm a big fan of his, and my period in the Blues locker room and the media was largely in Brian Elliott's time here, and I was always such a big fan of his. I thought he was just such a consummate professional, and I think he's an excellent choice to come back and do some coaching, and obviously he knows his stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how involved he is with the scouting, and if the Blues start scouting and drafting more goaltenders over the years. So welcome back, Kid Els, Moose, as some people call him. We all call him different names, right? But Brian Elliott, happy that you're back in kind of in a Blues jersey, but in a Blues role. Other news, the Blues did announce their 2024 preseason schedule, as well as the whole NHL did. Couple quick dates. September 21st at Dallas, September 22nd at the Utah Hockey Club, but that will be played in Des Moines, Iowa. September 25th, they will play the Columbus Blue Jackets. September 28th, Chicago Blackhawks. October 1st versus Columbus. October 3rd versus Dallas. October 5th at Chicago. And that is apparently going to be a neutral site game, but they have not announced where that is. It's literally says location TBA on the schedule. So we'll see where they decide to go there. There's nothing listed here for Kansas City, so you got to think that's at least an option that they'll be going to. And then in the release, it also did say Chris Kerber and Joey Vitale will have the call for every preseason contest on 101 ESPN. There was no mention of TV, but we have noticed in the past years that usually about 2 or 3 weeks before the preseason starts, Bally Sports announces, hey, we're going to be showing the games on our app. Maybe this one is going to be televised. So I would just be on the lookout for that. But keep in mind, there are some weird behind-the-scene things going on with Bally and their partners, and potential that the Blues will not be on Bally next year because I think there's an opt-out in September for all St. Louis sports for Bally. I could be saying that wrong, but definitely something to keep an eye on. And obviously we will have that news on this show as it comes through. But interesting that could happen. But as far as the preseason goes, I mean, I'm happy that we're at a point where we're releasing the schedule. Now it's okay. So we've got 3 months basically until hockey starts in St. Louis again. Interesting, the September 22nd game at Utah is in Des Moines. And if you look at Utah's schedule, this is their first home game, and it's their first game, and technically. It's their first preseason game. You're calling it a home game, but your new fans in Utah, their first actual game, I know it's preseason, it's not regular season, but still, it feels odd that your first game as a home team isn't even in your home city. It's at a neutral site. That's weird. That's kind of to me, a shot in the face to Utah fans. Like, hey, we'll get to you guys eventually. These people in Des Moines, though, they've been waiting for a game. I don't know. I'm fine with the neutral site games in preseason. Shit, do all games neutral sites. I don't care. But man, when you have a new team, their first look on the ice should be to their new fans. Very odd that the NHL chose to do that. And it's also odd that we've already scheduled this October 5th game at Chicago, but it's location TBA. That tells me that they're maybe deciding between a couple places, but again, that feels odd. You're already announcing the game date and time at 7 o'clock, but you don't have a location. Okay, interesting. We'll see what happens with that one. But, yeah, interesting with the off-site stuff this year. Very odd how the NHL handled it this year. And then, we talked about development camp last week. That is coming up. So July 1st through the 3rd. I know our friend Justin Scott, who joins in the chat all the time, asked me if I was going. And, yes, I will be there. So if you're going to be there, make sure to let me know, and I'd love to meet up with you and watch some of the development camp together. All right, so let's get into it. This week's show again, we have Mike Morreale, the senior draft writer at NHL.com and the co-host of the NHL Draft Class podcast. Knows all things draft. Very, very intelligent guy when it comes to all of this knowledge that you'll see with you see all the rundown of the players when they actually have the draft, and on the TV coverage, it's this guy played here and had this many goals, and this type of player, and Mike could do that job. I don't know if he'd want to, but he has all that knowledge. He can speak to what type of player this guy is, where he fits into a lineup. Very knowledgeable guy with this stuff. So excited to bring this episode to you. So when we get back from break, you will hear from Mike Morreale. This is Let's Go Blues Radio.
We'll return after these messages.
As a hockey player, Mike Burgoyne knows a thing or two about making the perfect play. And when it comes to real estate, he's always ready to score the winning goal for his clients. If you're a first responder, a veteran, a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, or a Let's Go Blues radio listener looking to score the home of your dreams, you'll receive special rates with Mike. Go ahead, shoot some questions his way, and he'll have the answer quicker than Curtis Joseph on a breakaway.
Curtis Joseph got the pedal down!
Any barriers? Mike will mow them down like Chris Pronger in front of the net. He'll score you your dream home or sell your existing home faster than a Brett Hall one-timer.
Flip past the Hall, he shoots, he scores!
See Burgoyne's real estate prowess in action today by emailing him at mike@strikewithmike.com or by calling 314-753-4060. That email again is mike@strikewithmike.com, and that phone number is 314-753-4060. Getting Mike Burgoyne on your team will be the boost your power play needs.
Well, honey, I just priced the power washing for the house, and I think we should just move and condemn this place. It'll be cheaper.
Did you try Wolf Power Washing?
Who?
Oh, I just saw this guy win the Stanley Ponder Cup Memorial Tournament and thought he was attractive, so I looked him up on social media, and it turns out he's the owner and proprietor of Wolf Power Washing. He claims he has the best prices in town.
But does he use non-flammable, non-toxic chemicals that are safe for Wolfie and our son, little Magnus?
Yes, he ensures there'll be no residue left behind, and he doesn't use any volatile vapors.
Well, this fella sounds like a dream. I just wish I knew how to contact him.
Oh, I know how. You can reach him at 314-420-5434.
314-420-5434, and his name is Joe Wolf of Wolf Power Washing?
That's right.
But how did you know his number so quickly?
I'll never tell.
Wait, what?
That's Wolf Power Washing at 314-420-5434. And make sure to tell him Let's Go Blues Radio sent you.
And now, back to Let's Go Blues Radio, the longest running St. Louis Blues podcast with Price, Ponder, and Day.
And we're back from break, and I am joined by Mike Morreale of NHL.com. He's the senior draft writer over there, co-host of the NHL Draft Class podcast, and also, just as you can imagine, just cranking out so many stories right now about the upcoming NHL Draft. Mike, three-time friend of the show now, so I'll be sure to get your members jacket in the mail for you. But thank you very much for joining us today, and look forward to talking to you about some draft prospects.
It's always great to join you, Jeff. It's a lot of fun, particularly this time of year, as you know, as we've discussed in the past. It's the draft is something I absolutely enjoy. It's something that I've done almost my whole life when I started getting into the newspaper industry and was covering high school players in New Jersey, college players in New Jersey, George Paros's, the Kyle Palmieri's, the James Van Riemsdykes, when they played high school hockey in Jersey. It was a lot of fun then, and to have an opportunity to cover the top draft eligible prospects for the NHL has been a dream come true for me personally. To see Connor McDavid, coming up through Erie, or Connor Bedard coming up through Regina, and seeing them, in the early stages of their careers before they hit the NHL, and now we know that the superstars they've become. So it's fun. It's a lot of work, as you know. It's a lot of work, but it's absolutely so enjoyable for me, and something I would I wouldn't pass up for anything else in the world.
Yep. Yeah. When I was in the media, that was something I tried to kind of make more my niche. Was I'm like, I'm going to learn the draft, and I'm going to get to know these prospects, and try to have them on the radio, and do everything I can to try and get to know these guys better, and be able to be more of a source for people. My Lord, there's just so many players coming through that it's just like every year it's like, okay, that draft's over. Now it's time to start working on the draft for next year and getting to know these players and understand what they are, what type of players they'll be. And as you know, a lot of it's sometimes just a crapshoot. You really think this guy is going to be grade A, top NHL quality, but then his game just doesn't translate to the NHL. So there's just so much that goes into understanding the draft and understanding the prospects that it's a lot of work goes into it.
There is a lot of work goes into it. That's why, as often as I can, Jeff, I always want to credit the scouts who put in the time, the effort, and the mileage to go see these prospects, no matter where they are. Obviously, I deal a lot with NHL Central Scouting, which is the base scouting bureau for the National Hockey League. And I tell you that the relationship I have with that bureau and the fellows that go through the hard times and the work and the travel has been great. They're so kind to us, so kind to myself and my colleague, Adam Kimmelman, who also does a lot of prospect coverage for us and is the co-host of the NHL Draft Class, as you discussed earlier. But the thing about the prospects, too, that I love, Jeff, is the fact that it's a whole new crop every year, a whole different voice, per se, of young players that want to play and be a star in the National Hockey League. So everyone has a different story. So while covering the NHL is also very, very cool, and I do a lot of that covering the Devils here at home base in Jersey, it's also nice to have different storylines entering each draft. Someone born in a different country. For instance, just off the top of my head here, it appears as though Norway could have 2 players going in the first round, and there could be more Norway-born players chosen in the first round than Sweden-born players for the first. I couldn't even count on anything when that might have happened in the past. But it just goes to show you that there's a new core of prospects coming through every year. They have their own set of talents, their own stories to tell. That's what makes the combine so interesting. But it certainly is. It certainly is a joy to talk to these kids and learn more about them.
Man, you mentioned it. Norway. We'll talk about one of the players, possibly at least one coming out of it. But one that stands out to me, and we'll talk about him as well, is you got a player right now that's probably going to be picked number 2, maybe number 3, who's from Belarus. And we talk on the show all the time. One of my favorite games of all time was Belarus beating Sweden in was that 2000 or 2004? And it was one of those games. Tommy Salo, as poor guy had a great NHL career and then just never seemed to recover after losing to Belarus. That would have put them in the medal round. So it was just, you see that talent every now and then come from some of these countries, but then you see like guys like, I'm sorry, I always say his name wrong. Levshunov. Is that how you say his name?
Levshunov.
Yeah. So like you see players like that are growing and coming out of that, and you think like they probably grew up knowing about the lore of that big game that Belarus beat Sweden. So like there's so many things that happen in hockey that lead to these kids becoming superstars for their countries that maybe weren't known for hockey before.
And he takes great pride in that, Jeff. I spoke to Levshunov on 5 or 6 occasions this year, watched him play an awful lot at Michigan State. He came over to the United States in 2022 to play for Green Bay in the United States Hockey League, and he hasn't been home since. So he keeps in contact with his mom and his brother, via whether it be Skype or FaceTime or whatever social media app you might have on the phone at the time. But here's a player that's dedicated, and usually those players coming from overseas have to have that dedication to stick here and learn the game, learn the North American game, see what it's all about. But Levshunov is one of those players that has done that from Zlobin, Belarus, as you mentioned, freshman at Michigan State this year. And yes, I had him go number 2 in my mock draft to the Chicago Blackhawks. Obviously, Chicago, had their big draft forward last year in Bedard, and I think now they need a pillar on the back end. And I think Levshunov is that guy. This draft is top heavy with defensemen, Jeff. There's no doubt about it. Levshunov's a righty. I think if I were to have an NHL comparable, probably be Aaron Ekblad. I like, his game along the blue line. I call him a tweener because we see a lot more offensive type defensemen in the game today, and scouts and GMs and fans love that, right? It's the quick pace. It's the push. How fast can you get the puck up ice? Can this particular defenseman provide more offense with goal scoring, getting pucks to the net for rebounds? And then a dying breed almost, Jeff. It's like, where are the defensive defensemen that we, in years past, old school hockey, guys that would stand up in the slot or maybe make a big play in the corner. And I think Levshunov has both those tendencies. He can be that defensive defenseman if you need to be, and he's improving that offensive game that we saw at Michigan State under the coaching of Adam Nightingale. Did an extraordinary job with Michigan State this year. But I like Levshunov, smooth skating guy, good high-end puck skills, and that's why I had him going number 2. And that's a great example. Another guy coming overseas, wanting to get it done. His dream is to play in the NHL, and that's all he says. I asked him, I says, by the way, what's your major at Michigan State? And he looked and he says, my major is hockey. That's my major. But yeah, Levshunov, an exceptional player. I would expect him to go at least top 3 in this draft somewhere.
Man, I didn't realize that was a possibility. If I'd have known that, I would have gone to Michigan State. I'd love the major.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
That's fantastic. You mentioned a couple defensemen. You've got him. You've got Sam Dickinson, who's a player that really excites me when I look at the type of player he might be. He's 18. He's already 6'3", 194 pounds, out of London. And you mentioned there's a couple more guys we could talk about here, but defensemen are always interesting to me, and Blues fans know better than anyone with the Eric Johnson draft in 2006. I remember after the draft, fans were excited, like, oh, let's see him next year. And he said, no, I want to go back to college. I want to hone my game a little bit more and then come to the NHL. Fans are upset about that, but it was like, I actually appreciated that. I'm like, good, like hone your game, hone your skills, say what you want about Eric Johnson as a number 1 pick. Dude's still playing in the NHL, shows that he has got longevity in this league. So for a defenseman, how much harder is it for them to step into the NHL game at a young age?
It's extremely hard. And in fact, it's the timing is impeccable there, Jeff, because I just we did a roundtable on NHL.com. Each of the writers had to pick a particular player for the awards that will be coming out when we head over to Vegas next week. And one of the awards I was assigned to do, one of the players of the awards, was the Calder Trophy. And obviously, Luke Hughes is among those finalists, obviously, along with Connor Bedard and Minnesota Wild defenseman over there, too, as well. So I think with Luke Hughes, and I'll use him as an example, here's a player that had to step into a Devils lineup. At the time, had a Dougie Hamilton back there, obviously coming off his second year from the University of Michigan, but stepping into a lineup that obviously needs the type of game that he brings, he provides. He's a big player, likes that transition, can play that defensive style if you need be. But once Dougie Hamilton went out after not even a quarter of the season in, Luke Hughes was tasked with playing top power play minutes, being the quarterback on the power play. And it was a struggle for him defensively. And here's a kid that obviously grew and learned a lot at the University of Michigan, but it's a very tough position to teach because a lot of it has to be instantaneous and it's spontaneous in what you're doing out there. You have to know what's going on. Obviously, your back is to the wall and you have to make some crunching hits every so often, or you have to have your gap in control and knowing what you're doing as a player out there against particular lines or specific players that they're always trying to learn up on. And obviously watching video plays a big part in that. But in Luke Hughes' case, I mean, obviously he's a finalist for the Calder, so he's obviously doing something right. And he put up a decent amount of points for the Devils this year, as well as, he created the most turnovers among any rookie this year. And I believe it was over 45 turnovers or takeaways that he had as a Devils defenseman. And this was without the Devils number one in Dougie Hamilton. So I remember talking to Dan McKinnon, the assistant general manager there, and he says it's a real struggle for defensemen early on. Those elite guys, can maybe step into a lineup and produce and be productive and do the things necessary. And a lot of it has to do with IQ at that age. If you're 19, 20, 21 years old, as long as you have the smarts and you know where to go with the puck, what to do with it in certain situations, because it's quick. Like I was saying, you're able to, play a part in a lineup, play big minutes, and the coaches are going to throw you out there because they trust you in big situations and timely moments of each game. I think Luke Hughes proved that. Obviously, he's got a lot to work on. Made some mistakes, but I think it is a learning process too with young defensemen. As the more time they get, the better they become. And one other thing I like to say is, like, some of the coaches in the American Hockey League like to put young defensemen in spots that maybe they weren't accustomed to with their major junior teams or in college. For instance, Simon Nemec, another young defenseman for the New Jersey Devils, never played penalty kill when he was in Slovakia playing there. So Nemec, however, was given an opportunity under Kevin Dineen in the American Hockey League with Utica to play penalty kill. And the reason why Coach Dineen wanted him to play penalty kill, he wanted him to become accustomed to playing more of a defensive style. Nemec was so accustomed to being the guy, transitioning the puck out of his own end, scoring the goals, leading the rush, making the big pass in center ice. On the penalty kill, you have to stay back. Obviously, you have to stay back. You learn your gapping. You learn how to defend in your own end. And Nemec was able to get that, figure that out in the American League. And that's why he was able to come up with the Devils last year and play almost half the season with the club. And he did a fine job in that regard. But going back to your question, Jeff, I know it was a long-winded answer, but yes, I mean, it does take a lot as a defenseman to come into the NHL and play and perform well.
Yeah, and hey, long-winded answers are more than okay on this show. It makes my job way easier. So,
All for that, man. All for that.
That's right. So I mentioned Sam Dickinson. He's a player that, he might go in the top 5, top 10. I would think definitely. Again, a player from the London Knights, big kid, still might grow at this age at 18. What can you say about his game?
Yeah, you mentioned the size. I mean, it's tough to pass over a 6'3", 199-pound defenseman. Obviously, he's been with London there, playing 2 full seasons. My comparison when I watch Sam play, Jeff, is almost like a Noah Hannafin type of guy. He's going to be a slam dunk to be a top 4 NHL defender with that size and that skating combination. Real mature approach to the game. He's very calm under pressure. He could probably play in the NHL next year if he puts in the work this off season to bulk up a little bit. I still think maybe another year in juniors would do him well. Maybe, London came a little bit short of winning Memorial Cup. Maybe that's something on his mind and something, and it's a goal of his that I'm sure he's looking to get. But as he gets bigger and stronger, expect the physical component of his game to become a little bit more consistent, I would think, with Sam Dickinson. But obviously, a fantastic prospect here. I thought he did well during the season. Obviously, 70 points. He scored 18 goals in 68 regular season games. So I like Sam Dickinson. I think from what I've seen in mock drafts, it kind of fluctuates where he's been falling. Some people have him going as high as maybe 6, 7. Others have him going maybe, 10, 11. So he's in that range, though, Jack, where I see him going maybe in that 5 to 14 range for sure.
Yeah. So Blues just missing out on Sam Dickinson, is what you're saying. Before we get to talking about who the Blues might pick at 16, which, that could be in itself a 3-hour conversation. I do want to ask you about the number 1 pick, consensus number 1 pick here, Macklin Celebrini. Shattuck, St. Mary's, Chicago Steel, Boston U, played everywhere, played all different styles of hockey, different leagues all over, and has just excelled in every single league. So no reason to believe that he couldn't do the same thing in the NHL. We've heard a lot about Celebrini in the past year since Bedard was drafted. And so for you, I mean, obviously there's a lot we could talk about with this kid, but what to you is the most exciting part about his game?
Yeah, just a very mature, and you mentioned all the teams that he's played for, Jeff, and I can't stress enough, like he basically took the U.S. Pipeline, right? I mean, he played for the Junior Sharks in San Jose when his father got the job with the Golden State Warriors. His dad, of course, is a health and performance specialist with the NBA's Golden State Warriors, and when they moved to California, they were just, a few blocks away from the rink there for the Junior Sharks. He played a season there. Then, of course, went to Shattuck St. Mary's, and then, of course, to Chicago in the United States Hockey League, and over to Boston University. But just a kid that is so determined to win at any level he's at. Very driven. I don't think a lot rattles him. There's been high expectations on him for a long time, and I think he kind of embraces that challenge. That's what I've seen. That's what BU coach Jay Pandolfo sees as well. Very prepared in the way he goes about things. And I think, that gives him confidence because he knows he has to put the work in certain areas, off the ice, on the ice. But he's as advertised. It seems every time he's on the ice, he makes things happen for the club. And, he's playing, or he did play this season at a real enviable level, all on his own. And he was with players at BU, obviously older players that he played with that respected his game. And I remember talking to Coach Pandolfo about that. Like, Jay, was there ever a time where you had to tell Macklin, you need to calm down just a little bit, or, you got some veterans on the team here that, maybe you're looking at you funny. But he says, you know what? He earned all the respect in the world from all of his teammates. He said at the end of year meetings with a lot of the players, whenever the topic of leadership came up, Pandolfo was talking about who do you think the leader should be in next year, that type of thing. They were saying, Celebrini was unbelievable. He said Celebrini's name was being brought up left and right. And as a 17-year-old kid, he's 18 now, just turned 18 on the 13th of June. But he was a 17-year-old his entire freshman year. And isn't that something? I mean, what were we doing at 17 years old? I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't even tell you. But yeah, so he, a dynamic player, earned the respect, is appreciated for all he does. And I think San Jose is getting a franchise type player here, no doubt.
Yeah, you mentioned it actually. He played for the San Jose Junior Sharks. His dad works for the Golden State Warriors. I brought that up last night to a friend of mine that I play hockey with, and he had no idea. And he's like, "How serendipitous that Celebrini he played for the San Jose Junior Sharks,
Yeah.
and now he's going to play for the San Jose Sharks." I mean, I know right now it's not official that this is about as official as it gets that he's going to be a Shark. Have you had the chance to ask him about, is he excited to play for a team that he's already played for the junior team for?
Yeah, he is. If he gets that opportunity, we all believe that San Jose is gonna, make that pick. When we talked to Mike Greer at the Combine, and director of amateur scouting there as well, Chris Morehouse, they wouldn't say it directly, but when we asked them, can you give us a little of what you like about Celebrini, they just were gushing and couldn't talk enough about the kid. But yeah, I mean, to get an opportunity, and when we asked them, hey, you kind of started your career in the United States, hockey career in San Jose with the youth team there. What would it mean to help, maybe provide a little impetus to the NHL franchise? And he was all for it. He's all for that. That's great to hear. You want to see that. Obviously, being able to play with his brother Aiden. Aiden was with him at the Junior Sharks. He was with him in the USHL. He was with him at Shattuck. He was a teammate of his at Boston University too. Now that's going to end. Real happy that San Jose might have an opportunity to select him, and he'd be all for it. And obviously, San Jose, we know needs some elite talent over there. They need some star power, and Celebrini is probably just the player to get them started there.
Playmaker, with a kid like Eklund there who can just fire the puck. Look out, San Jose. I mean, they had a little bit of a rebuild there, and I think they're a couple of years away, but man, they've got some star power coming up in San Jose. Just scary stuff for fans of the Pacific Division.
Yeah, they just they just signed Will Smith as well from college at BC. So Will Smith is another dynamic forward. And there's a reason why they signed Will Smith, because I think you can anticipate Macklin Celebrini being the number 1 overall pick and possibly playing for the Sharks next year. Now, there's been some talk, right, Jeff? And I'm sure you've seen this, that people are asking him, are you going to return to BU? There's a lot of unfinished business there. They didn't, they fell short of the Bean Pot. They fell short of the Hockey East tournament. They fell short in the Frozen Four. So there's a little impetus there too. There's some impetus in becoming a little bit more of a physical player, building up the body a little bit more, which all young players need to do before they reach the NHL level. It's obviously a prerequisite. You need to be big, strong to play against these players. So, I mean, there's some things there that maybe people will say, well, maybe another year in college would do Macklin well. But no doubt about it, from what I've seen, from what I've watched, Macklin Celebrini is NHL ready.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And it's funny because, here in St. Louis, the talk of Jimmy Snuggerud deciding to go back to school after what happened last year. His team lost on a fluke, and it was like, man, he just wants to, and he said something about how he wants to go back and he has unfinished business. And you got to think, Celebrini, that's in the back of his mind, because let's face it, San Jose is not going to win a Stanley Cup next year. You can take another year and be fine with, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to win everything for Boston U. And then I'll come back and I'll be even better for San Jose. So I think there is something to that with players, that having that unfinished business that they want to get to. And I don't know. I'm probably one of the few people who celebrate kids who do that. I know a lot of fans, especially in San Jose, want something to cheer for, and I get that. But for me, it's like, man, let the kid get the unfinished business. It's gone. It's not in the back of his mind anymore, what could have been. And again, you got another year of him learning, developing, and growing. Maybe he comes back even better. in 2 years for San Jose. But who's to say? We'll see what happens with what his decisions send him.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to that. And just to your point about Jimmy Snuggerud, he'll be entering his age 20 season in the NCAA. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what he does in year 3, right? If what now has been, I think it's a little over 84 points and 42 goals and about 80 college games in his career. So if he grows to, build upon that 6'2" frame this summer, I think he'll be the ideal size. He'll have the ideal weight. He'll have the strength to match what is already an incredible skill set. So I'm with you, Jeff. I applaud Jimmy Snuggerud for making the decision and coming out early to letting the Blues know this is what I want to do. And believe me, when he didn't come out and say this, but you kind of get the feeling he's like, after this 3rd season, I'll be ready to go, and I'm going to be the player that you guys need me to be to get back to the playoffs. So applaud Jimmy Snuggerud. And yeah, we'll see what Celebrini does. It's going to be interesting after he's taken.
Yeah, and I think for the Blues too, and because we're going to get to the Blues here, who they might pick at 16, but I think for the Blues too, it's exciting because you got a couple guys that came up this past season, Bolduc and Dean. Next year, there's a good chance Dalibor Dvorsky comes in. And so, how many rookies can you really have on your roster at once? So it's, for me, I'm like, I actually applaud it from the Blues side too, because, you're going to be focused on those other 3 coming in and playing forward. And excuse me. And, then next year you got this sensational rookie in Snuggerud coming in. So I think it just creates more excitement around the team for the next couple seasons.
Love Bolduc. Definitely one player to keep an eye on in September following, a full off season of training. I think there's a chance he returns in 24-25 and gives fans a solid uptick in production after what, were serviceable stints at both the NHL and AHL levels last year. And I'm with you, center Zach Dean was one player, I was excited to see get his first taste of NHL experience this year. And I think he's probably one of 2 front runners in the prospect pool to end up with the big club for all of 24-25, along with Bolduc. So Otto Stenberg is another one, right, Jeff? In the pipeline, I'm excited to see him. And you mentioned Dalibor Dvorsky, real versatile player, can play center, wing, but there's still too much established talent in my eyes on the Blues for him to seriously compete for a spot this fall. Now, no doubt he might contribute in training camp and do those things. Maybe he'll even play a few games to start the season. But I think Dvorsky is in a good place right now with his development. So Blues are in a good place, believe me, and this draft's only going to help.
Oh yeah. They've actually got a fair amount of picks too. People like to just look at the first round. And you look at the Blues, and they've got 2 second-round picks, 2 third-round picks, a 4th-round pick, a 5th-round pick, and 2 7th-round picks. And they've hit on many picks throughout the drafts over the last couple of years. I mean, you look at Tyler Tucker, who was a 7th-round pick, and was on the Blues roster all season. So there's plenty of opportunity for the Blues to build on what they've done this year. You mentioned Stenberg's a guy that, and then the Swedish uprising here in St. Louis has been very prevalent this summer. Even the signings they've made, the draft picks they've made recently. So it should be interesting to see where some of these guys, Lindstein's another one that comes to mind, of guys that the Blues have taken recently that really could step in. And I agree with you. I think a couple of these guys are a little, maybe a year or 2 off, but these guys are going to be coming in for development camp, training camp. It'll be very exciting to see what these guys can do at a higher NHL level.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you want. That's what you want to see. And, you see some organizations in the league that are patient with their prospects. They know how to groom them, how to marinate them in the pipeline. The Blues are one of those organizations. I think, Armstrong's done a good job with that and making sure that these prospects are NHL ready once they reach the NHL. Because I've said this all along, Jeff, and I know you agree. It's like, when they reach the NHL, there are going to be some moments where, they're going to have that deer in the headlight type of look about them. But the NHL is not a development league. I mean, you have to know exactly what you're doing when you need to do it. So if you need to develop, you'll stay in the AHL or major junior, wherever you need to be to gain those extra minutes. Otherwise, you're probably not getting the minutes you would want to kind of further along, your development in the NHL, because it's just not, that's just not the type of league it is. They are there to win, and they're there to win a Stanley Cup.
That's right. Blues again, many draft picks, but let's talk about the first round here. They pick at number 16 this year, as long as there's not any trades. There's a couple different guys that you could look at. I mean, obviously, it depends on how it all shapes out. Many things could happen. Players could drop. Players could rise. A couple names I've seen that could fall at 16. Michael Branzig-Nygaard, Trevor Connolly. Adam, I'm going to take a shot here and say Juracek.
Got it.
And I got it. Oh,
You
man,
got it.
look at me. I'm a pro. And Michael Haig or other guys. But for you, looking at 16 and maybe even at this point, kind of considering what the Blues' needs are, what's a player you could see falling at 16 for the Blues?
And by the way, Adam Juracek, who you mentioned there, is the brother of David Juracek, the defenseman that was taken by the Columbus Blue Jackets
There you go.
a couple of years ago. So David Juracek played his first full season with Columbus this year. Obviously, it was a team that struggled this year, but there's obviously real good promise for David with Columbus. And Adam is one of those players that hopes to follow suit. But you mentioned Michael Branzig-Nygaard, Jeff. Hey, maybe the Blues go back to Sweden after taking 3 first-round picks from the country in 23, right? You mentioned Dvorsky, Stenberg, Lindstein. Nygaard is a real good skater, strong on the forecheck. He can produce offensive chances from between the dots, low in the offensive zone. Led Norway with 3 goals in 7 games at the World Championship this year, and has decent size at 6'1", 207. So he played in Sweden's 2nd division this year. Real hardworking two-way player. I think that's an option for St. Louis. A kid that would be nice to see him there, and I think if he did drop, the Blues would snap him up in a heartbeat. From Oshawa, right wing Beckett Seneke from the Ontario League. Real nice combination of size, strength. He brings a real heavy shot, plays a 200-foot game, solid work ethic. He's right-handed and plays, his natural right side. 68 points last year, 7 power play goals. I like Seneke. I just don't think he's going to last 16, but there's always that possibility when you consider the international players that are going to be selected in here. And some of these North Americans drop. But Seneke, good size too, 6'3", 182. So Cole Yzerman is another interesting slot here. Cole Yzerman, of course, plays for the USA Hockey's National Team Development Program. U18 team, goes about 6 foot, 197. To me, Jeff, Cole Yzerman has the best shot of this draft class. I think you have Cole Yzerman. I think T.J. Ginla would be in that discussion as well. But Yzerman, to me, best shot of the draft class. But the only issue here is it just a sensational shot? Scouts seem to be torn on that issue. Some say he can become, more of a threat as a playmaker and be more reliable defensively. And if I can, I'll just share this story. Craig Button of TSN offered me when we got into a discussion with Cole Yzerman. I think you'll find it really, really enlightening. So I asked Button about Yzerman, and he took me back to the 1977 NHL draft when his father, Jack Button, was running NHL Central Scouting, and Bill Torrey was general manager of the New York Islanders. So Mike Bossy was playing for Laval in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, and all he did was score 70-plus goals every year. But there was all this talk about how all he did was score and he couldn't play defense. He wasn't tough enough. So the draft begins and Bossy is falling. It comes to the number 15 pick. That's where the Islanders are selecting. So Torrey walks over to Jack Button, who knew the Bossy family well, and asked me, he says, "Is there anything wrong with Mike Bossy?" And Jack Button said, "No, not a damn thing is wrong with Mike Bossy." So Bill Torrey went back to Islanders coach Al Arbor at the time and said, we're debating between 2 players here, Al. We've got this big, strong, powerful wing who might be a 20-goal scorer in the NHL. And then we got Mike Bossy, who all he does is just fill the net. But his defense isn't very good. So Arbor said, I can teach the goal scorer how to play defense. I can't teach the other guy how to score. So there you go. The Islanders take Mike Bossy, and the rest is history. So that was a fantastic story that Craig told me. So I love sharing that one because this is just a pure example of Cole Yzerman. And, he really improved, to me, his defensive game over the second half of the season. Some scouts and some other people may think otherwise, but if he's there, I don't think he's going to fall, but there's always that possibility again. But if he's there for St. Louis, I think that's going to be interesting. And Button, by the way, thinks that Yzerman is a top 10 pick. So you mentioned Michael Hage from Chicago, USHL, 6 foot, 188 pounds, has a little bit of a physical edge in his game. Real impressed with his ability to take over games late in the season. Sasha Brover from Muskegon in the United States Hockey League. Scouts really like the way he improved his skating this season. Is a real good goal scorer. Plays a 200-foot game. So I like what Brover was able to bring. Trevor Conley, you mentioned him, Jeff, earlier. Tri-City, the left wing there, was second in the USHL with 78 points in 52 games. Had 9 points in 7 games to help the United States win silver at the U18s this year. Goes about 6'1", 160, real game-breaking talent here. But there are questions about his on- and off-ice maturity that need to be answered by whatever team does select him. So that's going to be something that teams, and a lot of teams probably did speak with him about this topic at the Combine. He did have a lot of interviews. I believe there was maybe 28, 29 interviews that Connolly did have. And then finally, I just have to mention, Stian Solberg, the Norwegian there. Really like Stian and what he was able to provide this year for his club in Norway. I think he's was under the radar early on in the season, but his second half was just really incredible in what he was able to provide. I think a good comparison for Stian might be Ivan Provorov and what Provorov brings to the game. Competitive two-way D guy, plays active, or has a little bit of a physical game, a real good puck handler from the back end, and he goes about 6'2", 194. He's a left shot. So Solberg and Michael Brantzig-Nygaard are expected to be the first duo of Norwegians to be selected in the same draft since 2011. So that's going to be exciting to see. I know Norway's looking forward to that, and so are the players.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I want to mention you mentioned Yzerman. Let's make sure Blues fans aren't worried. It's not Steve Yzerman. It's not his child. This is spelled differently. It is Eiserman. So there won't be callbacks of the John Casey goal. So everybody calm down. But I love that story too you mentioned about Mike Bossy, because it makes me think of a Blues great. Everyone knows him, Brett Hall, who refused to play defense. I mean, literally, you could ask him in the mid-90s, and he would say, I don't want to play defense. I'm here to score goals. But then he goes to Dallas under Ken Hitchcock, learns the two-way game, and all of a sudden, him and Modano and Neuendijk, and some of the best two-way players that could score a ton of goals too. And that's a big reason they won the Stanley Cup. But then he goes to Detroit, wins another one, plays a two-way game for Scotty Bowman. So, yeah, you're right. It can be taught. You can't teach goal scoring at this level, but you can teach good defensive play.
Yeah, and it's almost like you have to force it into the players, but they learn. Jack Hughes is learning that, Jeff, for the Devils. I can tell you that much, because early on when he entered the league from the NTDP, got to the Devils, I think he thought he was good enough to go end-to-end on every rush he did, and that's just not going to work out.
No.
And he figured it out, that you have to learn how to defend, have to be patient, have to be poised, and you have to it's got to be a lot of give and goes before you can score the goal. And Yzerman did break Cole Caulfield's all-time record for most career goals at the NTDP, so that was quite an accomplishment with him. And on top of that, he did play on a line with Macklin Celebrini. Macklin and Cole Yzerman are best friends, and they played for 2 seasons at Shattuck St. Mary's. So And also, Yzerman's going to BU next year. So if by happenstance, if Celebrini does return to BU, they'll be on the same team once again. So I wouldn't. Yzerman is an elite goal scorer here. So I think you're right on the mark with Hull. And obviously, when Craig told me that story about Mike Bossy, that was fantastic as well.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I've got to ask you. I'm going to ask you to make predictions here. We don't like doing predictions on this show, but I've got to ask you because it does seem there's two things I want to ask you to make predictions on. There's a lot of defensemen that I think are going to be going in the first round. What's your number out of 32? How many defensemen are going?
There were eight defensemen taken in the first round of the 23 draft. That's and I'm talking just first round now. 8 defensemen. So I think that's certainly going to hit double digits this year. We may hit 12 or 13 in the first round. So that's an indication of where we're going as far as defensemen in this draft. I think it's rock solid. Obviously, starting with Levshunov at the top and what he has to bring. And we spoke about him. I also like Zeev Buium, the defenseman for the University of Denver, won a national championship this year. And Zeev, to me, when I watched him in the Frozen Four, the thing that impressed me most was how, everyone talks about his offensive game and how offensive minded he is. But I thought his defensive game was just equally as good. His gapping, his stick control, how he was pushing forwards off into the corners. He did a fantastic job against Macklin Celebrini. I mean, Coach David Carl had him out there against Celebrini's line whenever he could. Anton Salayev from the KHL. This defenseman goes 6'7", 207 pounds. Talking to Yanni Vorinen, who is the chief European scout for NHL Central Scouting, he says he sees a little bit of Victor Hedman and what Anton Salayev was this year. So there's another defenseman. Then, we talked about Sam Dickinson. We can go on. Zane Parik, another one I can't forget. Parik from Saginaw, the Memorial Cup champion in the Ontario Hockey League. Right-handed shot, goes about 6 foot, 179. I always have, and I'm privileged, Jeff, to go to NHL Central Scouting's final meetings in April. And they let me just sit in just to listen. I can't report anything. I can't tweet anything. I'm just there to listen. And believe me, it's just enjoyable just to listen to what the scouts have to say about particular players. And when they got to Zane Parik, Dan Marr, the director of NHL Central Scouting, asked the 8 full-time scouts that were present, give me the name of a current NHL player or maybe a past NHL player that you would compare Parik to. And believe me when I say every one of those scouts compared him to a Norris Trophy winner or someone that ultimately will win a Norris Trophy, like a Quinn Hughes. The most popular comparison was Erik Karlsson for Zane Parik. So an elite creative defender. And the term high risk, high reward applies to Zane Parik because the ceiling on this kid is unbelievable. And we are talking Cale McCarrish-like. I think there have been questions about his defending and how good he will be at the next level. But Parik is a player to me that's going to need some, he'll play a few more years, maybe 1-2 more years in major junior before he gets to that pro level, whether it be AHL or NHL. But you're hitting a home run here, no matter where you pick Zane Parik. I like what he has to offer, and he'll be an exceptional pro. And one more I'd like to say is Carter Yakimchuk from Calgary, the hitman in the WHL, another fine defenseman. I compared him to, I got him on my list here as like an Evan Bouchard type of guy, big, mobile, active D guy. So there you have like a handful of defensemen that I think, to me, Jeff, could go top 15 in this draft. So real strong year for defense, no doubt.
Yep. Other one is that we've talked about a little bit is Norwegian descent players. So what's your pick? 32 picks in the first round. How many Norwegians will go?
Well, I think both those Norwegians that we talked about earlier, Nygaard and Solberg, will go in the first round. Solberg's season to me, Jeff, had probably one of the finest second halves a prospect can have to catapult himself Spoke to Yanni Vernon about Solberg. They had him number 20 on their final list, and he said to me, if we were to do that list over again at this current day, he would probably be in the top 6, top 7. So to me, Solberg is going, and Brandstad Nygaard, who plays in Sweden, but is a Norwegian. It will also go probably before Solgaard because he's just an extraordinary athlete, great player, and has all the those intangibles that I discussed earlier. So both those Norwegians, they'll set a record this year, having both of them go in the first round, no doubt.
That's fantastic. So one of my favorite things about what that comes out about this time of year are the questions that come from the interviews with prospects. One that came out recently was they asked about I don't remember what team it was, but somebody asked about what your Uber score is, which I think is fantastic. People are like, why would they ask that? I'm like, I think it's brilliant to ask that question because we've had issues in the NHL with Uber. So, players saying things in the Uber, players doing stupid things in Ubers. I love it. I think it's a great question. What's one of the more off the cuff questions you've kind of maybe heard about, or even asked yourself to some of these players?
Yeah, that's always the best part. I mean, the testing is so highly publicized, Jeff, and that gauntlet that they go through on the final day is one of the things that people remember and talk about. But for me, it's always been the interviews with the teams and with us when we had the chance to sit down with them. The process of scouting a player during the course of the season, when you get to games, there's that removal of all you're doing is watching and evaluating how someone performs on the ice. And these are young men that they're still developing as people, as well as players, in the process of getting to meet someone face to face and have that chance to talk with them and ask, what they want to be is probably one of the biggest parts of the evaluation process. But yeah, I mean, the question part, when we ask these players for some of the questions that they were asked, it's always mind-boggling, and they come up with good ones. I think teams are learning not to ask too many crazy questions nowadays, but we still, you still get the odd, what personality trait he felt he possessed that would prevent him from playing in the NHL. There was one prospect asked, there's a 50-50 chance of a 20-foot python who hasn't eaten in 5 months is in the hallway outside the room. Which one is going out there if there's 3 people, including yourself, in the room? I mean, this is the kind of stuff. This is the kind of stuff they get. And I thought one of the more interesting questions too. It was I think it was a couple of years ago. They asked him, if they asked this prospect if he was a kind of person that would kind of test the water. You're sitting in a car with your swim trunks on. It's 100 degrees in the car, really hot, and you're headed to the lake. As soon as you get to the lake, you can either sprint and jump in, or are you the type that's just going to put your foot in the water and test the temperature? Tell me, what are you going to do? And I think most prospects responded to that they would kind of test the water. Some of these prospects are from the colder regions of Canada, so they say they want to test the water, especially if you're from Winnipeg, because you don't know if it could be ice water at the time. So I thought that was funny. And my colleague Adam Killman asked a prospect this past combine if he was asked anything crazy, and he did say, describe the color blue was something that was out of the, describe the color blue. So I said, well, how did he respond to that? And he's like, well, the color of the ocean or the sky in the clouds. It's something along those lines. I mean, but those are the answers you would expect, right? It's not a wrong answer. The best question ever, though, was asked by Dr. Amy Kimball. She's a peak performance specialist. She's worked for the Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins in their day. She's been with the New Jersey Devils. She most recently was with the Washington Capitals. And I remember she asked a prospect, and this is a good one. Would you rather have a 10-year NHL career and never win the cup, or play one season, win the cup, and never play again? So that gets prospects thinking, right? What are you
Right.
going to do? And a majority of them say the 10-year NHL career, because they want to meet, they want to develop friendships with players. So if they go 10 years and not win a cup, but get all, network themselves and have all these new friends and people that they meet, they would prefer that over winning the cup, playing one season in the NHL.
That's a question I'd love to ask somebody who's actually won a Stanley Cup. Like, looking
Yeah.
back, if this was the question you were asked, knowing what you know now, what would you say? Like, because that is an interesting question.
It really is. I loved it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And it's funny you mentioned the Python question. I gotta mention, I got a friend who is deathly afraid of spiders. Actually, he's a listener of the show, and so we asked him once, you've got to go get the mail. There's something in there you need. You have to, but there's a black widow sitting on top of the mail in your mailbox. What do you do? His answer was, I'd send my wife out.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
I thought you were going to tell me he's going to bring out a fly swatter and hit the spider off and do something like that first.
Oh, he's even too scared to do that. He sees a spider and he does. He calls his wife and he says, "Hey, go take care of that spider in the bathroom." And I'm like, "Come on, man."
Yeah. That's good.
Mike, always fun having you on the show. Always appreciate you coming on. I want to give you a moment here to mention anything, obviously leading up to the draft. There's a lot that's going to be coming out from you and everyone at NHL.com. So again, senior draft writer, NHL.com, co-host, and definitely check out, folks, the NHL Draft Class podcast. What can people expect from you in the next couple weeks?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I urge all our fans, all hockey fans, draft fans, check out all the NHL.com draft features, lists, previous draft class podcasts, in one centralized site, www.nhl.com/draft. We've done a lot of interviewing with the top scouts at NHL Central Scouting, on all the regions, the Western Hockey League, Ontario League. We spoke to Yanni Voronin today, International. That podcast is going to be up and running later this afternoon. So a lot of stuff to digest there. And of course, Jeff, with the Stanley Cup playoffs still going on, the boys over doing the draft and the great women there, over in Florida and Edmonton, series now 3-1. The content has been unbelievable. So check out all the work they're doing as well. It's a fun time. We're looking forward to Vegas and the Sphere. So it'll be fun to be out there and check that out for the first time ever. First big sporting event, right, to be at the Sphere, and it's going to be a lot of fun, Jeff.
That's awesome. So how can people find you on social media?
I can be reached at Mike Morreale NHL on Twitter, or X as it's called nowadays, and usually I'm tweeting out stories and other interesting tidbits there for draft information. So that's where they can find me. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Mike, thank you very much again. We appreciate you coming on the show again and being a longtime friend of the show. And best of luck covering the draft, and have a good time in Vegas. That's going to be a great moment for the NHL to be able to have that at the Sphere.
Yeah, it sure will be. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Always a pleasure joining you, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, special thanks goes out to Mike. Always love having him on. As I mentioned, I think this is his third time on, and kind of been a tradition here on Let's Go Blues Radio for Mike to join right before the draft. So expect to hear from him again next season. Maybe we bring him on when we have a game against the Devils coming up next year too, because he is a fun guy, and again, he knows his stuff. So always fun talking to Mike. Next week, we actually will probably be back live. Next Monday is Free Agent Day, July 1st. So we'll likely have a live show after that. So kind of depends on what the Blues do. If first day the Blues come out swinging, they make a trade, they sign one or two guys, we will probably have a show that night. If the Blues don't do anything the first day or the second day, but they do something on the third day, we'll have a show then. At some point, we will definitely have a show next week. Just depends on when. Again, it depends on what the Blues do, but I would expect to have a live show next week. Get back to our roots and, enjoy Season 13's first real summer live show. We did the Mystery Hockey Theater to kick off summer, but this is one with like actual news and our typical style. So looking forward to that. Hopefully we have something to talk about with the Blues, whether it's trade, signings, whatever it be. Maybe even news around the league that's so big we should talk about it. But yeah, expect that next week. I think that'll do it, folks. Thank you very much for tuning in. Support for Let's Go Blues Radio is brought to you in part by Mike Burgoyne from Real Brokerage Realty. Email him at mike@strikewithmike.com today for all of your home buying and selling needs. That's mike@strikewithmike.com. And by Wolf Power Washing, St. Louis's premier power washing company with the best rates in town. Call Joe Wolf at 314-420-5434 and get the best looking and greatest power washer in the area. That's 314-420-5434. That'll do it for episode 37 of season 13 of the original St. Louis Blues hockey podcast, Let's Go Blues Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in and have a great week, everyone. Looking forward to our live show next week. For Kurt Price and Bill Day, I'm Jeff Ponder, and I will talk with you next week. This was Let's Go Blues Radio. Until next time, everyone, let's go Blues.
Sit, Ubu, sit. Good dog.
You thought I was going to say, son of a bitch, didn't you?